The Stack. People, Business, Technology. With Dan Tomaszewski of Everything MSP.
Hello, everybody. Dan Tomaszewski here with Everything MSP. Welcome to another episode of The Stack, where we focus on people, business, and technology. Today, we're going to talk about something that every MSP thinks that they've got figured out until that day they don't. And that's backup and ransomware readiness as we head into 2026. I'm going to be joined today by Josh Flores, who's a general manager at Comet Backup. I'll bring him in here in just a moment. We're going to break things down into three but critical questions that every MSP should be asking right now about their backup strategy. You know, this is something that's not next year. It's not something that we do after an incident. It's something that we need to focus on right now. And I really want to set the stage here because backups are one of those things that, there can be a dashboard and it can look great. You can have reports that look clean and everything feels completely under control until a restore fails during a real incident. And ransomware attackers know this. So today it's, not going to be about backup theory or shiny features. It's about asking the uncomfortable questions that tell whether you are getting complete backups that will actually save you when it matters. So let's go ahead and bring Josh in. And there we go. How you doing today, Josh?
I'm good. Thanks, Dan. Nice to be here.
It's great to have you here. And I know you're keeping yourself quite busy and, it's a brand new year and it's, a great time for us to really, take a look at our strategies, take a look at where we're at. And of course, backup is one of those most critical things. Now, of course,
Mm,
we want to be looking at this, day in, day out. But, as the new year starts, it's always great to, just take a look, do that refresh and make sure that we're on top of things, right?
yeah, it is. It is. And what you sort of said in the intro there really sort of resonates here. Sometimes it can be a bit of an uncomfortable thing that you need to look at your backups. Perhaps you haven't been looking at them in a while in the holidays and that type of thing. But it's also something that I think some people look at and go, look, the dashboard looks green, all the backups successful, everything's fine. And some of that is, complacency. And we all get like that. Everything looks fine.
Yeah.
I think probably the biggest thing that I'd like to talk around this and what we've seen from talking to MSPs and providing support to some and things like that is that people can neglect actually going through and checking the backups themselves. And
Yeah.
so, what does that actually mean? It means not only looking at the dashboard and going, great, I can see successful backups, I can see everything's looking fine. This has been green for this period of time. It's actually going that step further and going, cool, if the customer called me tomorrow, do I have, am I absolutely confident that everything is going to work out fine, that everything's going to be there? And every backup solution on the planet, you should test the backups regularly. It doesn't matter who you're using. It's nice if you think, hey, I trust my backup provider or what. It's just the nature of technology that you should always trust everything and you should always test everything itself. And so I really recommend that people go in there and try doing test restores periodically. Some of the best MSPs that we've seen are ones that have their own essentially schedule amongst their techs or some sort of roster where they go through periodically, pick a random backup, say of the month or the week, and they'll test the restore just to see that it works. Because one, that's great that you're able to validate and go, yeah, I checked that the other month. The other thing that sort of goes with this, and is often, I would say, somewhat forgotten, is every member of your staff or person that's managing the backups, do they know what to do if they get that call and say, hey, I need those files back? Because we've
Right.
seen situations where there's been an MSP, perhaps it's after hours, it's gone to the on-call roster or something like that. It might be one of your junior techs or somebody that hasn't necessarily had experience doing the restores and giving that data back to your customers. And they don't necessarily know what to do with that. So it's great the data's there, but then obviously the next step is you have to get them back and restore it.
Yeah.
So it's good to, refresh your staff as well and know that they know what to do beyond just clicking the restore now button, but also giving the data back and perhaps getting their environment back up and running. So it's really sort of those two key things. It's make sure you're testing it, set a simple schedule or something like that, that you're
Yep.
just going through and doing it. Of course, it's not the most interesting thing in the world to be running a restore and taking the time out. But it's that thing that you don't want to be caught out if disaster happens. And second of all, it's good for your staff. All your staff should know. If you're the owner of your MSP and you're the only one that knows what to do beyond restoring the files and downloading them, that's a real problem, right?
Yeah.
What if you're on holiday? Do you want a call from your staff to then help you to help the customer? Probably not. So a fair bit there, but I hope some of that's really useful, because unfortunately these are some of the things that we've seen with MSPs, and we've worked with them to help correct and change these types of things, and we've seen them really improve not only their internal processes, but also the experience with their customers by seeing what they're doing, and they're demonstrating the value to the customer.
Yeah, and I think too, that process is so critical because, it depends on the size of the organization. If you have somebody that's dedicated, if you're a very large MSP and you've got a particular technician that's dedicated to backups, they're going to have a very defined plan. But even if it's a smaller, MSP, let's say 1 to 5 technicians, you still want to have the same processes in place, which could include, a daily ticket for, doing those backup checks, whatever your cadence is for doing those restores, having a ticket for that, and have them be automated, so that, as you onboard a new client, part of that onboarding process is those regular automated tickets, so that, day in, day out, you're getting, that notification and you're completing that ticket, because that's the good old CYA, of course, that, that has been done. And, if it's left to, hey, we've got some free time here, why don't you check backups?
Yeah.
That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's just a process, and that was a great example. Yeah, create a recurring ticket. Even if you just check one backup a day randomly, you're at least doing something.
Right.
So break it down, make it easy. You don't need to spend a whole day restoring all of your customers. Even if you're just doing one a day, that's great. That's a great option.
How about for those people that say, hey, I did this before, we've never had a problem? Pretty dangerous assumption, right?
Yeah, and it's not just IT, but things like that in life in general. People are like,
Yeah.
I've never had an issue with this. This has never broken down. This has never have a problem. You just got to prepare for the worst.
Yeah.
You can't rely on anything. You want to check it yourself, and you should have that peace of mind.
Exactly. And, so, just key takeaway here, it's so critical, is that, a backup that's never been restored is really just an assumption. It's not a strategy. And,
Exactly.
so, yeah. So, the other thing that, I think is critical is, our backups truly protected from ransomware? How about that? I mean, because,
Yeah. So
yeah,
it's a big thing at the moment. I mean, people know ransomware's out there. Customers are relying on essentially you, the MSP, to go in and protect them. But also, what are you doing to protect yourself? Because every MSP that's running backup is unfortunately quite a juicy target for people that are wanting to perform I suppose, criminal activities. You're a juicy target if, for example, you're well known for, say, having a lot of medical data that you're protecting and storing. You yourself are also vulnerable for it, and you're at a risk. So it's really important to ensure that with the backups, that not only you doing backups, I suppose, in the correct way of protecting them. So some of the examples are making sure you've got strong passwords on everything. You're using multi-factor. When it comes to the storage, perhaps you've got different storage options. You're using object locked or immutability. If you're even got more serious customers, perhaps even air gapping, periodic copies and things like that. Ensuring in even your own internal networks, you've got your own access controls. Basically, backup is one component of protecting from ransomware. The other is just layers upon defense. As you've got to keep building up other things to mitigate that and protect that. So backup is one part, but also you should be looking at all your other internal security and tooling. And whether yourself as an MSP, if you're installing, say, an EDR or endpoint detection on your customers, do you also utilize something internally for your own internal systems?
Right.
There's plenty of great providers out there. For example, people like Huntress, we love what they're doing. Things like that are really key, that you should not only be thinking about protecting the customers, but also be thinking about yourself, because sometimes you can sort of neglect that a little bit. Like the first example we're talking about, backups. You can be so focused on making sure the customer's protected. You
Right.
yourself might go, well, it's not going to happen to me as the service, provider. I'll be completely fine. So you need to sort of step back a wee bit and look a bit wider at that.
Yeah, I mean, because the last thing we want to do is, in the heat of the moment, in a dire crisis with a client, that we are down, that
Mm,
we have an issue that's, keeping us from taking care of the client. And, of course, we are always focused on mitigation. There's no, foolproof way. However, if we aren't, of course, practicing what we preach,
yes.
then that's clearly a bad thing. And
Mm,
especially, let's take a look at it from this perspective. You know, Attackers are going after backups, right?
mm,
So they know that that backup is our escape hatch, and
mhm,
so they're looking at that target of,
mhm,
okay, I'm gonna hit both, right?
mhm. Yep, they're looking at that going, what can I do here? Can I either, wreck the backup system because perhaps you're using your own easy admin passwords in the backup solution, or can I get into the backup storage itself? So perhaps you're using a third-party cloud storage provider. Can they
Right.
easily get into that themselves and then just trash all of the history of your backups? So
Yeah.
it's really critical that you're thinking about each piece that you're using in that backup component, and taking a step back and going, have I hardened this? Have I done the best practices possible to secure this, to make it more difficult? Or, really look for ways to mitigate, any sort of attack on those different areas. Again, it's just, thinking about it logically, like thinking almost from a worst case scenario, going, what's the worst thing a hacker could do right now if they got access to our systems? Are the keys in plain text somewhere? Do I have, and I hate to say it, is
Yeah.
there, an Excel file on my desktop with passwords and usernames, which
Right.
we've unfortunately seen before. So things like that, think about that and think, what can we do here? And think, is this best practice?
Yeah.
Go from
Yeah, I
there.
mean, let's face it, Notepad, WordPad are
Yeah.
technicians' favorite application, and how easy is it for them to copy those keys and just throw
Yeah.
it in there, and out of sight, out of mind, and they forget that that's where
Hmm.
it's at, and totally disastrous process there.
Yeah. Huge. Huge.
So, if, of course, overall, that backup security is that the frequency of the backups, is what we're talking about here. Does our backup coverage match today's environment?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and it's one that I think, as the MSP, you should be thinking about, perhaps when you're meeting a customer for the first time, or perhaps you have a periodic check-in with them, is really looking and reviewing at what they're doing and also what you're backing up. So, for example, you might start a relationship where you're just imaging all the computers, but then you find out later, and the customer might not have even told you, they're using a database for some records, or they're using something else, another piece of technology they've started using. And perhaps they haven't shared that with you. So you're not actually backing up, perhaps the log files or anything critical to that component. So it's really key to be, I suppose, having those check-in with customers to not only check in to see if the requirements have changed, but also sort of probing to find out, are they using something else that perhaps hasn't been protected that you can add to it. Not only does that obviously add more value for the customer in terms of the service
Right.
you're providing, but it also increases that coverage now, because there is so much stuff that people are using. I think the days of where every customer can easily be protected with just files and folder backup is gone. Some people
Yeah.
will be using a little bit of 365. Some people might be using a database. Other people might be using an application in the cloud, but they're able to download local files and that type of thing. It's really key to not just set up the backups once with the customers at perhaps at the start of the relationship, and don't check in and follow that up until disaster strikes. You want to have a periodic check-in to actually know, are we protecting everything for you guys? Is there anything that we need to review or audit here just to make sure that we're up to speed
Right.
with what's happening?
Absolutely. And you brought up a really good point of, have any requirements changed? And I think,
Mm,
taking a look at retention, compliance, and
mhm,
recovery expectations, it's clearly something that we don't just, in the beginning of the relationship say, okay, we
mm,
got it. And, that's going to be that way forever because, there might be new requirements. Maybe
yep.
there's a new division of their business that,
Mm,
has different compliance requirements or, whatever the case may be, there are several reasons why these might change. And, or maybe they've discovered that, from, how much data they're willing to lose or how long they're
mm.
willing to be down, they might have different expectations. So we should be checking in with them on a regular basis in our technology business reviews.
Absolutely. You made a really good point there around retention. Um, some there's various different things where some customers have seen going, look, I'm really happy to have perhaps a month's retention for this specific data, but then
Hmm.
they might have some other stuff and they go, look, these files or this folder, I specifically need a year. And now a lot of well, with backup, it's really easy to roll out the same retention policy for absolutely everything. So everything's got 30 days. But that's when you need to get a little bit, suppose, a little bit more surgical with it and going through the customers going, great, perhaps our policy is that we'll provide 30 days retention. Is there anything that you need an exception to that or a longer period or that type of thing? But again, this is actually just having a really thorough discussion with your customers and
Yeah.
not just installing the backup, ensuring that C drive is backed up. It's actually going a little bit further than that to dive into like what are those real requirements.
Right. Yeah, and so I mean, bottom line here is, if we're not testing, isolating, and auditing, we're simply
Yeah.
guessing, and and we can't operate like that. So, Josh, before we wrap up, I want to make sure our listeners know something special about Comet pricing that you're offering. If you essentially want to pressure test a backup strategy yourself, you
Mhm.
guys have a free trial available to our listeners, correct?
Yeah, correct. And if you just use the promo code Everything MSP when you sign up, you'll get an extended trial, extended credit. And for us, we really provide that for the users of Everything MSP so that you guys can really come in, kick the tires, run a lot of backups, run a lot of restores, ask a whole bunch of questions. You should be really happy with what you're wanting to deploy and use before you take the next step with any piece of software. And that's what this promo code is for the community here to provide that ability.
That's awesome. We greatly appreciate that as well. And you also have another promo for Q1 of 2026 release coming up in regards to Proxmox, right?
Yeah, Proxmox, as you probably know, over the last couple of years has really exploded in terms
Yeah,
of popularity, and it's been our most highly requested feature to add in Comet. So we're really pleased that at the end of January, early February, our Proxmox backup will be available for all users of Comet. The slightly more interesting piece of this is not only can you back up Proxmox using Comet, you can also use it to perform migrations. And so if
Oh,
you've got customers that are
nice.
using, say, VMware or Hyper-V, and they've said to you, hey, I want to move to Proxmox, you can actually use Comet to move that data
Oh,
from
wow.
those. So yeah, so you can use it for migrations and then protect. So
Oh,
it's a
wow. I
little
was not
two-step
aware of
thing
that.
for customers.
That's
Yeah, quite.
awesome. Yeah. That's got to be a very, a loved feature that
Yeah.
when MSPs hear about that.
Yeah, yeah, it's quite an exciting one because there's obviously, a lot of shifting in terms of licensing and models and what people want to do. And so the fact that we can facilitate people to move, workloads and then also protect them, we think that's a really cool feature.
That is very cool. Josh, this has been an incredible conversation. Much needed reality that MSPs need heading into 2026. I want to thank you for joining me today. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, Dan.
And for everybody listening, I want to make sure that you check out Comet Backup, and you can reach them at cometbackup.com. I do have that going across on the ticker. And don't wait for disaster to find the holes in your backup strategy. So, as we answered each of these three questions, now is the time to take a look at them and fix it while you can. And thank you for tuning in. Until next time, we will talk to you soon. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Stack.